Thank you. Roman Szumski with the National Research Council of Canada, that includes IRAP. I really would like to thank the Academy for the opportunity to speak here. I never thought I would be addressing this audience. I am a medical doctor and an FRCP by background, but I made two career mistakes. And the first was I got into management quite early and ended up being responsible for reorganizing lab services in Alberta when healthcare restructuring hit there. And the second is I went to the dark side and joined industry for about 10 years as a VP of Science and Technology for MDS Inc., which is a homegrown or was a homegrown multinational that grew up to $2 billion before it went into pieces and got sold off. And currently, I am the Research VP for Life Sciences at the NRC. What I want to speak about today is give some perspectives on the Canadian performance with respect to commercialization of health research, indicate some of the actions and activities that are underway at the NRC to address the challenges that are being faced, and also end up with a what if, or imagine if we could have the following kind of conversation to really propel ourselves to an accelerated generation of prosperity from the health research. So it's been really well summarized by previous speakers who are much more eloquent at this than myself, but the performance is basically not satisfactory to date, and we've heard lots about that. In fact, that's what the purpose of this meeting is. So Canadian firms are not sufficiently harnessing innovation to meet competitive gains. We continue to place in the middle of the pack and so on. But what's interesting about this, and this has been emphasized by previous speakers, is that no one is saying the funnel is lacking for good ideas. What they're saying is that the industry pull is lacking. And that's the challenge that we're facing as a nation. So the consequence of the synthesis reports, the reports that came before from STIC and from reports like Jenkins, one of the reactions that the Canadian government had was to do something really different with the NRC. So this is a kind of diagram. We would all create this for our organizations where you're in the middle and you show all the other parts around you. NRC often is seen to be placed between industry and the basic research and fundamental research that takes place in a number of centers, largely in universities. And what's really changed with this, I just want to, if I can very quickly in a minute, say what's different. So we're in the same place, but we now actually have moved, if I really wanted to draw this the way it really ought to be, the NRC would be an overlapping Venn diagram with industry. So to give an example of this, 5 years ago at an audience like this, I would have been talking to you about these great monoclonal antibodies that we developed to treat cancer and how much better they are than the ones that come out of the McGill Cancer Center or Ontario Institute for Cancer Research. That was 5 years ago. Today, we are not inventing any of our own molecules. We are only working with an industry molecule and helping them advance their product. So we're now in a position where we're complementary or additive to the work that you do and not in competition with what you do. There we go. So also the reports have had an influence on the IRAP program, the Industrial Research Assistance Program. So this is a program that was set up over 70 years ago to help SMEs advance their innovation and advance their companies. In addition to the funding, there are 240 industrial technology advisors across the country that speak to the SMEs and help them with developing their business plans, finding sources of funding, and doing many things in addition to perhaps ultimately providing some funding to move a project forward. And over the years, it's been demonstrated that the investment in IRAP has a pretty solid ROI for the country, and that $1 invested in IRAP turns into $12 of economic impact. And that was convincing enough over time and the results of these reports to result in some very recent changes to IRAP, which are pretty important. First, in the last 3 budget years, as you know, have been really tough for funding. Government has, for the most part, been reducing and eliminating programs and cutting back. But in 2012 budget, $110 million a year was added to double the support that IRAP can provide to SMEs. So it's now up at $220 million a year. This is the new money. In 2013, $20 million was provided to help SMEs access research and business development activities and services at universities, colleges, and the like. So to help get the bridge in to access the expertise of people like yourself. And in 2014, $30 million was added to support youth internships to promote the hiring of students in the companies. And that is a move to help the movement of human capital into industry. Now, just an interesting observation, if you look at where, it's historical, it's 2006 to 2011, where has the money gone that IRAP has spent on industries? And if you look at it, the thing to want to highlight is health and life sciences represents 8%. And that is just a surprise observation when you think of how much investment goes into CIHR and Genome Canada and NSERC related to health and life sciences. It's such a large R&D component there. Yet this is really, it's not like it's proactively driven by IRAP. We follow the companies, we follow the market opportunities and invest where we see them. And that's what the number turns out to be. So it's interesting. I think with the new investment, actually my call on this is that the health and life science piece of the pie grows a little bigger. And then from the STIC report on the state of industrial R&D from 2012, we have this slide, which I find fascinating, because if you look at the left side, the S&T strengths in Canada, and you look at the right side, the economic strengths in Canada, there really is there's no match. You have expertise in clinical medicine, economic strength in aerospace. You know, historical study, oil and gas extraction. I mean, I can't make a link, so the ones that you make are kind of ludicrous. So it's kind of interesting to note. But it really is a consequence of the discussions we've heard before around real strong academic strength, but poor industry pull for the capabilities. If we look specifically at the pharmaceutical sector and health and life sciences sector, most M&Es spend less than 1% of their global R&D investment in Canada, right? Now, that's not fair. We're supposed to be 2% of everything, aren't we? And it's way below that. The industry struggles to transition SMEs to viable commercial positions. And ironically, for many Canadian biopharma SMEs, the typical success path is to be acquired by an American or other foreign company way too early in the process. And then, it's already been mentioned, the M&E R&D in Canada, activity in Canada is primarily devoted to clinical research management. And we've seen all the major companies move their R&D centers out of Montreal. And we know about that. Now, one complaint you often hear is, well, there's not enough money, not enough VC, not enough angel. I actually don't agree with that. There's plenty of sources of funding out there. There's over 580 provincial and major municipal funding programs that are accessible by the sector, and they have mandates to disperse, if you add it all up, $2.2 billion a year. There's 140 sources of private financing accessible by the sector. That includes angel venture capital and private foundation. I have an advisory board of industry leaders and life science investment bankers and so on, and they tell me quite regularly that no, there's actually enough money. We just don't trust investing it in the sector quite so much, so we put it somewhere else. So what I want to leave you with is just an example of an opportunity. I could have picked a couple, but I just want to reflect on something that's happened in the last number of years, and that is that Medtronic Canada purchased CryoCath in Montreal, an innovation for treating atrial fibrillation that came out of the Montreal Heart Institute. And there's a good story around this in that recently with the Quebec government, Medtronic is committed to investing another $50 million, hiring 200 more people, but they're going to grow something in Montreal. But I don't think the story ends there. You can imagine that a company like Medtronic, they didn't just buy this entity in Montreal. They also bought a similar entity with a competitive technology in San Diego. And they're traveling the world, and they're trying to corner the entire market for atrial fibrillation. Medtronic wants to become the global dominant player in the treatment of atrial fibrillation. So the conversation we really ought to be having is, how do we sit down with Medtronic Canada and have them win within their company to make Canada, probably Montreal, the global center that is their center for dominating atrial fibrillation. If that kind of conversation could happen, if the governments and NRC and the other agencies that need to come together to make that happen, obviously including the company itself, And I haven't had this conversation with them. This is a imagine if or a what if conversation. But if you did that, that represents a tremendous opportunity and requirement for expansion of the expertise on the academic side. In order for Medtronics to completely succeed at something like that, they would have to establish that Montreal was the world clinical leading center for the treatment of atrial fibrillation. And that's how these companies think. They divide markets down really, really finely and decide what they want to lead on. And we have to be equally focused and fine. We can't sort of give a generic, oh, let's do something in biopharma together. You really have to get down to the markets. And they know their markets. They know where the strengths are around the world and what the needs are. So I think there's many other examples that one can come up with in this imagine if scenario. But from my perspective, the next step we need to do is try to get that level of expertise where medium-sized companies grow to large companies in our country. Thank you.